Adaptive mesh. Let's only probe the part of the bed where we print. But before every print, I admit it has merit, but there is a right and wrong way to do it, and there might just be an even better way. Let me show you on the example of the new Comgrow T300. This Klipper printer has just been announced, and there is already a firmware update which, among other things, brings this desired feature. But should you really update? First, I've tested the latest firmware update 1.5.2, so you'll know what to expect. I'll take you through the process from making a backup, through finding the update files themselves, all the way to applying them. It doesn't come with a changelog, but I'll show you everything I found that has changed, and what you want to do after the update. And this will bring us to the second part, where I tell you why and how I installed Christian Vick's Klipper printer editions on my T300 as well. A little hint: every Klipper printer deserves KPA for that perfect preprint experience, and more. Gergo here, from Gergo Print 3D. Have you watched more than 2 of my videos? Thank you if you did. Have they been worth your time? If so, please consider subscribing. It's the only way more people can find my channel by the YouTube algorithm. In return, I will do my best to keep delivering my best to you. I posted about my experience with the new T300 firmware in the beginning of the week in the Comgrow user group on Facebook. And I did not recommend the update then. I've spent the rest of the week tweaking things, but has my opinion changed? Keep watching to find out. Before attempting any updates, I always make a backup. We need a way back. I made an eMMC image backup earlier. It's a bit more difficult to get to the eMMC card on the T300, but the rest of the process is the same as I explained it in my earlier video, which I will link from the description below. eMMC backups can only be restored as a whole. So I also backed up my user files from the printer in case I'd need to restore things selectively. For this, I used WinSCP to connect to the printer. Pause the video here if you need help with the login parameters. All of these are found under the MKS directory. Turns out the update did not erase any of these, though it did overwrite some of the config files with new defaults. So the backups were useful. The update files are on sovol3d.com, now under the new wiki section. I found the T300 and the chapter on firmware update. Now we don't need all the files from here. This large file with the IMG file extension is for a full image restore of the eMMC card, not necessary now. Instead, get this TFT file that updates the device screen and the DEB file from update dir. I used the USB stick which came with the printer. I already have a backup of its content on my computer, so I just followed Sovol's instructional video to quick format the drive and copy these 2 files. The file names and locations do matter though. I renamed the TFT file to clipper.tft and copied it into the root of the USB stick. And I also renamed the DEB file to zc_app.deb, all lowercase, then created the directory named update_dir, all uppercase, and copied into it. After properly unmounting the USB stick, I turned the printer on and waited 20 seconds or so until the temperature screen settled. Only then I plugged the stick into one of the USB ports. The screen acknowledged the presence of the update and took about 5 minutes to complete the process. That was easy. Let's see what has changed. Version now shows 1.5.2, so that's a good start. Mainsail now only shows a single update warning instead of the 2 before. Still not totally happy, but a step in the right direction, I guess. No visible change on the extrude page, but unfortunately, the functionality went worse. On version 1.3.5, I could press the extrude or retract buttons, and they would automatically heat up the nozzle, feed or unload the filament, and then immediately start to cool the nozzle. It was so great. Why did they have to change it? Now, all they do is tell you to manually heat the nozzle, and even when it's heated, they advance so little that they are basically useless. I have to now press them 10, 15 times to load the filament. It's crazy. It's broken. Moving on, they've added a whole new change materials function on the control page. But this one does a bit too much. It forces us to unload the filament even if we don't have any loaded. Worse yet, it forces us to load filament even if all we wanted was to unload, without any way to escape this process. On a more positive note, I was delighted to see the model list is finally sorted by date instead of the useless alphabetical order. But it is still fairly slow to load, and I tested, it still only works with JPG thumbnails. The biggest change in appearance is on the level calibrate screen. It no longer shows our current Z offset, which is a shame, and the layout is different. But why? Let's stop at this screen. The update replaces our customized printer CFG, which means we lose both our previously set Z offset and bed mesh, and they don't even warn us about this. Very important, you'll have to recalibrate Z offset, otherwise both your nozzle and PI sheet could suffer. If you're using my Z-tilt via knob upgrade, you will also need to put the include line back into printer CFG. But at least my macro still works correctly on the new firmware. I tested, of course. The biggest change is in the way bed meshes are handled now, because they have enabled adaptive mesh. This means we wouldn't even need to use the bottom heated bed leveling button, since the printer will now create a mesh before every print, by probing only the area where our part falls on the print surface. Now, this could be exciting news, except that it didn't work very well in my experience. First and foremost, what they don't tell you is that you have to make a bunch of other changes both in the config files, in the printer, and in the slicer to make this work at all. I will give you the list of these changes in a minute, because without these extra settings, the printer will just do a complete 9x9 scan before every print, which also got slower than it was before, thanks to the changes they made to probing. The full scan now takes a whopping 4 minutes, probing every point at least twice. Imagine adding this much weight before every print. But even if you make the necessary changes in the settings and use this new adaptive mesh, it does it in a very bad way. With the nozzle fully heated, the filament will keep oozing like crazy through the whole scanning process. By the time the mesh is complete, the nozzle successfully rolled a giant ooze ball, and with each probe motion, shaped it into an enormous blob on the tip of the nozzle, or messed up the whole print area. This will become part of the first layer, failing the print in short order. Based on just this, and the degradation of the extrude page functionality, I really do not recommend this update, unless we implement some fixes, which I will talk about in the second half of this video. Actually, I recommend these fixes even if you skip this update, so be sure to keep watching. Starting with the adjustments I had to do to make this native adaptive probe function work. First, I made timestamp duplicates of my config files, printer CFG, moonraker.conf, and macro CFG. Please watch my video on recovering config file backups. You might need it. Then I added exclude object to printer CFG, enable object processing, true, to moonraker.conf. Enabled object labeling and exclude object options in Orca Slicer. By the way, I demoed this exclude object feature in my switching to Orca video. It's a pretty useful option on its own, so I recommend making these adjustments even if you are not planning to use the adaptive mesh part. Those config file backups came in handy because at one point in my experiments, my printer failed to start. The device screen was stuck and I couldn't even use the web interface. Scary. I had to go back to WinSCP. Fortunately, it could still connect, and I restored my timestamped moonraker.conf file. Turns out, adding comments to the end of lines in moonraker.conf breaks Moonraker, and the printer won't boot correctly. Again, all these eventually made native adaptive probing to work, but I was so unhappy with it that I also tried going back to the way my printer worked before the update. So I disabled the lengthy mesh creation before every print and just used the default mesh by making the following changes in the updated macro CFG. In the bad mesh calibrate macro, I commented out the line bad mesh calibrate adaptive equals 1 and instead re-added these two lines, and I also removed bad mesh calibrate adaptive 1 from the start print macro and replaced it with the good old bad mesh profile load default. So this way I could revert back to the way they used to be in version 1.3.5. Glad to have those backups I made before the update. But what if I tell you there is a better way? We can have adaptive mesh or even temperature-based multiple meshes and a much smarter, quicker preprint process that takes care of oozing and the perfect first layer. Of course, I'm talking about Christian Vick's Klipper printer editions, well known to Sovol Klipper screen users and viewers of my channel. Watch my earlier video on all the advantages of KPA, most of which can be used on any Klipper printer, including the T300. This is really big. So here's how we can get Christian's KPA to work on our printer. Start by downloading his printer editions from Printables, link in the description, and we extract everything into a folder on our computer. Before we start to follow the steps in his documentation, let's make these two preparations in Mainsail. As explained in my backup video, let's make a timestamp backup of our printer CFG. We are going to add a pile of new macros. I recommend switching macro management to expert mode and move all current macros into a group called T300 original, for example. This will help keep things organized. Now we are ready to follow CV's setup guide. We create and open a directory, printer_editions, and we drag all the files from printer editions on our computer in here. We remove the part_template from the name of the module loader, so future updates would not overwrite our modifications in here. I enabled the following components. The base functions are mandatory. I also keep all slicer modules, although I mostly use Orca. Keep both in-height modules. These can be lifesavers. One gradually adjusting the print speed over a certain height, and the other lets us schedule a pause at a layer even after the print has been started. I also enabled the calibration and preparation tools and the advanced tools, so I could disable gantry leveling. And I also kept both bad mesh modules. Christian doesn't recommend disabling these, but the rest of the options are specifically for the Sovol printers. None of them should be enabled for other models. Next, he gives us the include line that we have to put in our printer CFG immediately above the save config section, leaving blank lines before and after. Even though he tells us, let's not save and restart yet, because I found a bug that prevented my T300 from starting correctly. I had to go back to the printer editions directory and edit the base functions file. I don't exactly know why, but changing the two quotation marks in this line into a pair of apostrophes fixed the issue. Now we can save and restart. The console reports KPA started correctly, but we won't see any of the new macros until we organize them into groups. I created these three: KPA calib, KPA mash, and KPA print. It's easy since his macro names start with these words. In the dashboard section, we move these KPA groups near the console panel. Because these macros show information in the console, they should be able to be on the screen at the same time. Yes, we can press the new buttons to learn about them, and we'll need to double press them to adjust their settings. So I press the prime line button a couple of times to move it on the left. I'm conservative that way. I also turn off spiral head cleaning. You can use it if you want. We can set either mash adaptive by pressing the button twice, or mash multiple. If we go with the latter, we'll need to generate meshes for various bed temperatures, since the bed warps differently at different temperatures. We can also configure the resolution of the mesh. Setting the probe point distance to 30 millimeters, for example, will result in a 10 by 10 mesh on a 300 by 300 bed, right? I leveled my gantry using the Z-tilt via knob macro. I talked about it in this earlier video. Then I started mash create all temperatures. My leveling macro already heated the bed to over 60 degrees. Christian's multi-mash macro generates temperature mashes in increments of 10 degrees, beginning at the bed's current temperature, 60, followed by 70, 80, 90, and 100, which is ideal since I don't plan to ever print at temperatures below 60 C. It will take about 2.5 minutes for each temperature-specific mesh to be created, so the whole process took about 15 minutes for me in total. While all these bed meshes were getting created, I could set up my slicer. Christian has guides for this too. I followed the one for my favorite Orca slicer, replaced the old start and end G codes with his, and made sure all the options he mentioned were set as recommended. I'm now getting to be pretty happy with my Orca presets. I even made a few filament and process variants. I made them available in this free CALDS 3D project, link also in the description. It now contains all these KPA settings as well. All bed meshes created, I was ready to test. Using multiple meshes is quicker since we work with pre-made meshes. But I recommend leveling the gantry before every print since the Z motors can easily get out of sync and the pre-made meshes all assume a perfectly level gantry. You can see how the print head is parked while the bed is heated. At this point, the nozzle is only heated to 150 Celsius, just below oozing temperature. Then it quickly heats to print temperature just before starting the nozzle cleaning moves with the iconic samurai move and the prime lines. I'd say the bed level test print turned out quite well. My Z height is correct. I could increase the flow rate for this filament though. I also tested the adaptive mesh variant, which is a bit slower, but it could be safer because it can correct for tilted gantry, though Z-tilt calibration is still recommended before the print. Unlike Comgrow's own start G code, this one does the mesh probing before heating the nozzle. That oversight prompted me to bring Christian's Klipper editions over. This test print came out even better. I'm so happy with my T300 after this whole software upgrade. Not so much with the official firmware, but what came of it with all these additions. Let's keep talking about this in the comments below. Yes, we started with the official firmware update. Whether you install it or not is really up to you. Either way, you can have Christian's editions on your T300 or any other Klipper printer, which is the real game changer in my opinion. Comment which Klipper printer you are using. More on these in my switching to Orca video, but according to the algorithm, this of my videos is even better for you. So keep watching or go print 3D. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. It means a lot.